Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
So, question for the audience. How do you get your team to speak up, work better together, and actually create change? That's exactly what Jason is here to talk about today. Our guest today is Jason Doiron from the Purposeful Group. He's a bilingual consultant, dynamic speaker based in Moncton, New Brunswick, who helps organizations spark meaningful dialogue and create lasting change. With over 20 years of experience in community development and social innovation, Jason brings deep insight and heart to every conversation. His passion for powerful questions was shaped in the Canadian Arctic, where he first honed his craft behind the mic at a small French language community radio station in Iqaluit. Whether he's guiding teams, leading events like ckUp nights in Moncton, or exploring how language shapes the way we connect, Jason's mission is simple: help people think deeper, listen better, and build stronger communities. Jason, welcome. Absolute pleasure to have you here, sir.
I do, and it's a quote by Robert Bourassa. I'll say it in French and then loosely translate it into English. Je pensais être. I thought I was undecided, but I'm not sure anymore.
Organizations and their internal dialogue. What do they get wrong? If you've ever been part of the corporate world, what do they get wrong?
I'm asked to come address a group or face a group and ask questions, because for some reason, people love paying me for that, because somehow they aren't very capable sometimes of asking good questions. And so I try to flip the script and say, well, what kind of questions do you ask your team when we're on team meetings, when we're working together, when we're collaborating? We tend to ask very surface level questions that often just are very transactional, about making sure people get the work done. And what I invite people to do is ask questions that pique curiosity and innovation. One of the great ways you can reframe questions is by using the how might we format, the how might we statement. Whether you're brainstorming during a team meeting, when you want to find innovative solutions to long-standing problems, we try to ask questions that inspire change, inspire innovation. So how might we make our communities better, for example? How might we make workplaces safer for everyone? It's a great way of kind of flipping the script on how we ask typically yes and no questions or reflection questions.
I find interesting about being a young entrepreneur is we're scared to death of failing, and so that we live in imposter syndrome and dread. And you found a way to undo that. Tell me more.
Yeah, one of the things I encourage the most, and I can speak to an event we regularly organize here in Moncton called ckUp Nights, is to encourage people to fail faster, fail forward, and fail better. When we fail, we learn. And oftentimes in the workplace, we tend to wear masks. We tend to worry about performance a little too much. Performance is important, of course, and getting the job done is really important, but we rarely have the chance and space to actually try something in a risk-free environment. So in a lot of organizations, we tend to have people who focus on satisfying our supervisors instead of actually doing impactful work. One of the mantras of ckUp Nights is failure is a gift. In the workplace, we want to encourage people to fail better, but that needs our leadership in business, in organizations, in government to be okay with failing. We need to give permission people to fail. Otherwise, they're worried about performance evaluations. They're worried about, their pay raises. They're worried about job security. And if we can build spaces where we have permission to fail, we get more stuff done and are more impactful in our work.
You speak about language and communications and internal dialogue inside the business itself. When you say language, what do you mean by language? Is it the content or how it's spoken? What are the variables? What do you mean by language, though? Because it's going to influence culture.
Yeah, it's a great question. Language is culture, actually. When you work in a workplace, you communicate all the time, and it's very easy to forget the weight of our words, the phrases we use, the way that we label things. If we are a work culture that is focused on KPIs and performance issues, necessarily the semantics of the words that we use are going to influence culture, and culture is going to influence the words that we use. As leaders, if you are a business leader or a colleague working with other people, the words that you're going to use are going to affect the mood, the levels of productivity, the general enjoyment of what you do in your workplace. When I say language is important, the same way when I speak about powerful questions, using different words bring out different meanings and different feelings. When we reimagine questions through the how might we, as I mentioned earlier, we feel more creative and feel that there's more openness to try new things. When I say how might we, it's not just to use three words, they're actually meaningful. The how is talking about action and progress. Might is about not being sure of the outcome. Change the workplace is there's pressure there. If I say, how might we, I'm offering curiosity, I'm offering space for conversation. So the words that we use every single day are going to influence our coworkers, our employers, and our clients as well.
We're on Zoom, which means we could be talking to 5 continents and 6 generations. How do we span both language and generations, and how do we compensate for vast differences?
That's a big one, Wade. Of course, we know that our workplaces are getting much more diverse. You mentioned generations. We're also mentioning language. We have multilingual workplaces where people speak English, French, Urdu, Hindi, Spanish, Arabic, and it's more and more part of our everyday life where we need to bridge the gaps and create bridges between people that have different ways of seeing things, saying things, and working. When we work through these workplaces, we call intercultural workplaces. It's not about multiculturalism. It is about interculturalism because we need to also reflect as entrepreneurs, as professionals, how we communicate our values, how we communicate what we need and want in the workplace. In a much more diverse workplace, working with other generations is a challenge and needs to be a part of the conversation. One of the methodologies, so through my work, I work in participatory leadership, what I call, and participatory leadership is about creating space for these conversations to happen. Leadership needs to shift from a top-down approach to a collective approach. Even though we work in large organizations with supervisors and hierarchy, we still need to create spaces for collective leadership within office spaces, within teams. We need to bring out the best out of people. We hire people, we get them to do the best work. And if we are not bridging those gaps by not learning and teaching about intercultural skills, we're going to lose potential. We're going to lose that innovative spark that we might have if we actually focus on how we bring people together. One of the tools that I use is circle practice, which allows for everyone to sit around a table. We give everyone a chance to speak and share their mind. No matter what hierarchy we work through, what culture we are working with, what's common in all of our different cultures that we find in the workplace is the capacity for humans to communicate in a informal way. This idea of gathering around a circle, whether it's around a campfire, a coffee table, or a board table, we all have the capacity to have meaningful dialogue, no matter what generation we're part of, no matter what country we're from, no matter what language we speak.
Usually when you're talking language, and right now we're talking about oral communications, same thing with written communications. Is it the same thing? Or you have to frame it and space it differently?
It's just as important. I would actually talk about the art of invitation. When we work in workplaces, we send emails to invite people to reflect on things, maybe attend a meeting, and often forget the importance of purposeful and meaningful invitation. When I work with organizations about the written aspect of intercultural communication, it is about making sure that our asks and wants are clear. Whether we are inviting for a work session or communicating through an intranet, a blog, or a corporate email account, There needs to be a thoughtful process behind writing words. Writing words, whether it's an email or spoken, has just as much weight. The difference is obviously emails, we can copy them and send them out. They have some permanence to them. Even more when we want to engage the workforce, when we write emails, when we write messages on Slack, we do need to think about how we're coming across. Not to overthink it either, but just be authentic. What we've seen in intercultural communication is this idea that we want to bring back the informality of conversation and actually deconstruct. Team meetings tend to be over complicated, over structured, and we're trying to create spaces where we have more informal communication, the water cooler conversations that we might not have as much now because of working remotely much more since COVID. We want to bring that back. So that helps workplace culture thrive as well, to have these spaces where we can communicate with the written word as well.
One thing that I find is many tribes find their own jargon. And one of my favorite was facilitation. You don't like that word. You prefer hosting. Unpack that for me.
I don't hate facilitation. It is why I tend to use hosting the same way that we don't facilitate a dinner party with our friends. When we invite people over for coffee, we don't facilitate conversation. We host friends, we host people in our space. My work as a facilitator is more about hosting because it is about creating space for comfort, informality, innovation. And if you've gone to many conferences, you'll notice that the better conversations happen during the happy hours or the cocktail evenings. In French, we say the 5 à 7. Exactly, 5 to 7, totally translatable. Often those conversations are overlooked. We have the more creative conversations with a bit of caffeine or liquid courage at the pub or the coffee shop. And that helps a lot. When I speak of hosting during conferences, when I work with organizations who, for example, are organizing symposiums or forums, say, well, how can we create space for hosting people? We are welcoming people into a space that is not necessarily theirs. If you've been in a conference room, it's not conducive to comfort most of the time. So I invite people and organizations to think about how can we host people and make sure we take good care of them. We keep them caffeinated, hydrated, well-fed, and also have creative processes during our team meetings and events so that they're also they're also feeding their brains and their souls. So they actually have a human experience, not just attending a panel conversation and a Q&A, but actually taking part in something that's bigger than just the sum of their parts.
You brought it up, so it's fair game. Tell me about hosting your soul. You don't hear that in a lot of business sites. Tell me what you mean by that.
When I say soul, I say it not in a spiritual way.
No.
I tend to use soul when I speak of the human experience. People come to a space, they're not numbers, they're not a list of participants signed up on a spreadsheet. They are human beings with their own experiences, their own worldviews. They have souls. They come in with their own unique perspective. And so if we're going to work with people who have all these different perspectives, we need to be mindful of how we host them, whether it's at the office, in a conference room, or in a boardroom, in a coffee shop. We need to be mindful of their uniqueness, their authenticity. So that's what I mean by soul. Feeding their soul is making the human experience of work and collaborating and innovating a meaningful one. So there's not only extrinsic motivation, like getting paid, like you get your salary every 2 weeks or whatever, but also intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is I'm motivated by something because I'm just doing the thing. I'm motivated by the thing itself, meeting people, working with people, collaborating. The more we can encourage that intrinsic motivation, no matter what the context, I think it's super beneficial for workplace culture.
This all stemmed from being up in Iqaluit. What made the light bulb come on and go, hey, qu'est-ce que c'est? Nescafe? Sorry, I couldn't resist
Yeah.
that. That's kind of, my Anglophone ramming words here with French. It's not happen often though, but what made the light bulb come on?
Oh, it was an interesting chapter of my life. I had just graduated from university here in Moncton. I'm the type who kind of changed my mind a few times. I started in theater arts, did that for 1 year, realized it wasn't for me. I love being on stage, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't going to make a career out of it. Switched to a Bachelor of communications and linguistics. Communications because I love radio broadcasting, which I'll loop back to really quickly. And linguistics because I'm bilingual. I live in New Brunswick, the only officially bilingual province in Canada. And for me, bilingualism and the fact that I always considered I was born bilingual because we would listen to TV in English, listen to music in English, but I would go to French school. So I spoke both languages. I remember reading the Times and Transcript with my dad before I even went to preschool. I just read the titles mostly and looked at the comic strips. Back in 2006, I had been involved in community radio broadcasting for a while since high school. My local community radio station, a French language radio station. Shout out to CJSE, the folks down in Shediac. They've been running this radio station years now. I had the chance to be part of student radio clubs. We would play music in the cafeteria during lunchtime, and I volunteered at my local radio station. Instantly loved being kind of backstage, listening to the radio hosts interview people. I love the music part, but what I really loved was the talking and hearing people call on the phone and share their thoughts. The radio host would ask them questions and go deeper into the conversation. So I did volunteer in radio broadcasting for quite a while. Eventually, during my undergrad, got involved on campus radio, and I pretty much did anything from volunteer management to radio programming to music to newscasting to hosting the morning show to hosting the evening show. I did the wraparound of this radio station. And when I graduated, I saw this job posting for a coordinator for this small radio station up in Iqaluit called CFRT, the only Francophone French language radio station in Nunavut. My friends jokingly said, you should go up there. I had never left home, but I'm like, I have nothing to lose. Sent my resume. They call me the next day and say, hey, we want to interview you. We'll actually be in New Brunswick for this conference next week. Let's meet up for a chat. Met up with them. I got offered the job right off the bat. And I was like, okay, wait. I'm going out to the Great White North. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I could not decide until my friends were like, when will this kind of opportunity appear again? I was like, I don't know, probably never. I was like, well, try it out. Try it out for a few months. See if you like it. If you don't, fly back home. I stayed there for 2 years and I loved it. Some people stay for a few months. Some people stay there for a few decades. It's kind of a love it or hate it or a bit of both. It's a beautiful part of our country. It's also part of our history, and learning from the Inuit there, learned a bit of Inuktitut as well, made really great friends. And that's where I really honed into my art of asking questions, because I would meet all these really cool people. For some reason, Iqaluit attracts really cool people.
Iqaluit. I was cool people.
Yeah. I use cool because I don't want to use the word weird or unique. It's kind of a modge podge of people from across the planet that are attracted by this cool energy. That's the Great White North. Started interviewing a bunch of people. French politicians appear there. And Iqaluit brings in a weird array of celebrities as well. Got to interview more cool people. I really love this art of speaking, this art of asking good questions. And then I came back home after a few years, worked in the nonprofit sector, facilitating workshops, asking questions again, kind of being in this curiosity space. The connection through all of those things was asking questions. I'm very lucky to be able to facilitate conversation, host conversations for nonprofits, for governments, for businesses who want to create space for dialogue.
You mentioned your first year in drama, and some of our guests have mentioned improv. And I'm guessing improv plays a role in your life. We know that improv helps you think on your feet. We know that you will certainly get over stage fright by saying you did it and then doing it and doing it. But does it go beyond that? Do you find that improv still regularly works into your hosting and your guesting?
It's definitely influenced how I work. I tend to be a person that I'm not very detail oriented, for one. And I tend to shy away from saying I wing it, which is a very bad way of saying I adapt. I'm very adaptable and agile. Saying to a client, oh, we'll just wing it. It's not really a good sales pitch. But saying that you'll offer a bespoke service is probably a better way of framing it. So I tend to be on my feet a lot when I facilitate. And it does help me adjust in real time to the feeling of the room, the environment, the attitude. With repetition, you start the art of facilitation, and that's something that I am able to teach now to other people, and saying, in my mind, everybody has the capacity to be a good facilitator because we're all social animals. We have conversations all the time. Yes, you'll have to work through some shyness or introversion, but I'm an introvert. It probably doesn't show much, but I'm a very strong introvert. Once I'm done facilitating, once I'm done after this interview, I will need a little break. You don't need to be extroverted to be a good facilitator. You just need practice. You need to get some reps in, the 10,000 hours. You have to clock some time facilitating. Now I'm able to teach facilitation in the workplace to people that usually hire me. Some people say, why are you teaching something that you get paid for? If I can create workplaces that have this spirit of dialogue, conversation, and innovation, then I've done my job. Then I can work on deeper skills, bigger projects, and I can offer my expertise for capacity building in those workplaces. I have some projects coming up, which they haven't concretized yet, but I want to get into offering spaces for people to practice facilitation. You mentioned improv. In the facilitation world, we also use improv. Some call it applied improvisation or applied improv, which is applying the principles of improvisation in a professional setting, using failure as a construct in the workplace, trying things, failing forward. Prototyping and innovation is about improvising because we try new things with the best of our ability and we see if it works. And if it doesn't, we try it again. Improv is a part of our society and it should be a very strong asset to our companies and organizations.
You said that one of your gifts is asking good questions. How have you found a way to let the speaker feel safe, that they don't feel they'll be judged or attacked based on their answers to the questions?
There's a lot of framing that goes into asking a question. Before we actually get into a question during a workshop or a brainstorm session, I frame the fact that we are all imperfect. We've all been in brainstorming sessions. And I tend to think that the biggest downfall of a brainstorm session is that other people will judge our ideas. And that's not the first pitfall. The first pitfall is actually us filtering out our own ideas and prejudging our ideas before we even share them out loud. So some of the ways that we frame that in the workplace is saying, I want you to write down all the crazy ideas that you have on a sheet and give that sheet to your colleague. Now, don't tell them they're going to give their crazy idea sheet to their colleague before they write it down, because we tend to filter out the ideas that we don't think are innovative enough. In applied improv, there's a principle called yes and. And yes and says, yes, your idea is legitimate. And what I like about your idea is this aspect. What we tend to do is think that our idea in itself is good. Oftentimes it isn't. Maybe it's boring or it's not innovative enough, and that's okay. But when I share it with someone else, it can trigger something in the other person. It can switch something on in their brain and say, oh, that's an interesting idea because I've thought about this. Maybe the interactive aspect of your idea is what we're looking for. So not seeing ideas as whole things, but as a combination of elements that could be useful. When we do brainstorming sessions, I always say, write it down and share it after, because we know we have introverts in the room. Write it down first, and then I get people to share out loud. And hearing the ideas and connecting them with applied improv, with ESN, with these curiosity questions like the how might we's, and saying, whatever happens. Yeah.
We need this all kind of feathers really well into fuck up nights then for entrepreneurs, because I goofed and this is my goofiness and this is my takeaway. How do you make that story? You don't make the story just stop there. You're looking for something from the audience, for a feedback loop. Are you not? And then help build more outcomes where someone says, oh, you know what? I've been there myself, got the t-shirt, didn't like it, and then gave it back. How do you help that story have a success turnaround? Because whether it's the person who has a mousetrap that didn't catch mice, but it's good for feeding pigeons, whatever the case might be.
Yeah. The concept of fuck up nights is that the failure is the lesson. This isn't an invitation to craft a hero journey where you fell down, got hurt, and got up again, and now you're super successful. The super successful thing, we talk about it all the time. Our chambers of commerce celebrate that, and they do a great job doing that. Our business associations, we give prizes to people who have really big success, and we put them on a pedestal, and they're awesome and they're inspiring. I agree. As an entrepreneur, I'm failing, I'm trying things. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't. The idea of celebrating failure or hearing failure stories, the failure itself is the story, not what we do after. The lessons learned from the failure is the important part. So actually we had the first event on June 19th, and we'll be having 2 other events this year. We invite 3 entrepreneurs from the Moncton area to share their epic failure. Then we have people asking questions. So there's a Q&A. What did you learn from what would you have done differently? And that's where the magic happens, is in the dialogue, is in the conversation. The story is there to spark a thought and saying, yeah, I probably should be mindful when I get into that situation, or don't do what I did. That's the concept of it. And then the conversation that comes after, and the business connections and the networking is also part of the magic.
Something that just speaks to me as a podcaster, are you either have launched or are toying with launching a Fuck Up Night podcast so that the world can hear your stories?
Fuck Up Nights is a worldwide movement. The headquarters are in Mexico City. We're part of over 250 other cities that host Fuck Up Nights regularly. Some of them you can find on YouTube, much like the TEDx model where they film the talk and publish it on YouTube. That's what we're planning to do. We're going to publish the videos on YouTube so people that weren't at the event can hear, but also the speakers can see themselves on stage and also promote themselves, share their story out loud to social media. So that's part of it. I think having a podcast, at least talking more about failure in a general sense, could be super beneficial.
We have people you can talk to about podcasts.
I've heard. I would love to connect.
Do you find that having a background where you're bilingual, gone to multicultural locations, because the life up in Iqaluit is definitely not in Montreal or Toronto, and even living on the East Coast is different, right? Where we live sometimes, it's unique to that region. And I've seen it with people that I've worked with that are from other countries that have immigrated to Canada. And it provides, you're on the same page, but you're getting a different point of view, perspectives change. Has that helped you in your delivery of services that, hi, I've got a bit more diversity, so I'm not homogenized. I'm not 100% white milk here, right? I've got other flavors coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Has that helped also? You did the radio station right out of university, and now you've had that experience. Has that helped you when you're talking to people and you're talking to businesses and you're helping host or invite people into a session? Like even the construct of, not just sitting here hosting, I'm inviting you for a conversation.
Thanks for the question. What I have defaulted to the most is humor, and I'll explain why. I was in Abu Dhabi a few years ago to speak and facilitate a workshop. I was there for about a week, and I thought to myself, okay, I know nothing of Arabic. I know very little about the culture in Abu Dhabi. How am I going to approach this? When you go into a new culture that you've never discovered, there's a bit of fear, there's a bit of anxiety, there's a bit of stress. There's a lot of uncertainty. The first thing I noticed when I got in the room was people laughing. People in Iqaluit, Inuit love to laugh. Laughter is a big part of who we are as human beings. And I realized it's very universal. Humor is universal. I was actually listening to a Jimmy Carr comedy special, and he's being questioned by somebody in the audience that says, do you think Americans understand British humor? And he's like, yeah, of course. Humor is a little bit different, but people understand. Humor and laughter is part of who we are. The first thing I noticed is they love laughing. So I started learning a bit of Arabic. Every day I would go to Duolingo or, Lingui or ChatGPT and find a way to try speaking Arabic. And they would laugh at me. I just loved it because it was humanizing. It was a really great way of setting the tone, also bringing down tension. So the one thing that I notice in these multicultural situations, a few times a year, I facilitate a workshop with a good friend of mine, Jesse Kirpin, around networking and volunteerism. For every time we see about 100 newcomer students that have decided to come study in New Brunswick. And again, we just crack jokes, we laugh together, we get to know each other, and all through humor. I think it's a very great way to bridge those gaps, and probably a really good way to help workplaces create more enthusiasm when we think of intercultural skills. I think humor is a great way of working through that.
One thing I find is from Bernie, his goal is to meet every life coach in North America. That seems to be his goal.
Wayne gets a good, colorful comparison chart.
But one thing that they all talk about invariably is clarity. They all talk about getting clarity. And you found a way to let the employees form or focus or shape their own clarity. Tell me more about getting the company to form its own clarity. I want to hear more about that.
That's interesting. I hear that a lot as well. Sometimes we tend to confuse clarity with consensus. When we think about a team, let's find a clear vision and mission for our organization or for our team. Meanwhile, we have people coming in from different perspectives. I think clarity is different for everyone. You can definitely, in a more traditional or hierarchical organization, command clarity for your mission and vision. I think that totally makes sense. If you run that type of organization, say, when you work for us, this is our mission. This is what we do. This is the values that we uphold in our workplace with our customers. Some organizations who are actually focusing on participatory leadership, on collective wisdom and intelligence, actually offer space for a group to find clarity on who they are and what they stand for. It doesn't mean everyone agrees 100% with everyone and everything, but it means everyone can consent to being part of a team that has these shared values. Maybe my personal values are a bit different than others, but I can agree that when I work in this context, this is what we're working for. And then we could have a whole conversation about personal clarity and what I want to accomplish in this world. But I think in the workplace context, I think it makes sense for people to create space for that conversation.
Is there a one tool or a practice model that someone can use for a startup so they have that communication, they start following the right path? Is there something they can leverage or look to? Do you have a book, perhaps?
I don't have a book currently, but my work as a facilitator is asking good questions. If I can teach other people, or at least offer space for people to learn how to ask better questions, I think they can go a long way. So looking up workshops around participatory leadership, I'm part of a community called The Art of Hosting. Great resource, or trainings everywhere. I offer some workshops online and in person on participatory leadership, on how to ask better questions. Right now, I'm focusing on team meetings because I find that's the real pain point for most people. We meet together, we do the work, we make decisions. The famous sentence, this meeting could have been an email. And I'd like to say on the flip side, this email could have been a great conversation. If our team meetings can be meaningful, innovative, and curious, I think we can go a long way. Rethinking how you host meetings in the workplace is a great start. If you are a boss or a supervisor or a business owner and you are the one talking most of the time during your meeting, you are doing it wrong. That's the furthest I'll go on saying this is wrong. You shouldn't do that. If you are speaking most of the time during your meeting, you are doing it wrong. You need to create space for other people to show up and facilitate conversation. The art of facilitation for me is a great skill set to build within your organization. I get hired as a facilitator, but I would much rather teach facilitation in workplaces where they need it the most, because I think the art of facilitation is something that we underestimate a lot. We tend to overstructure our meetings and leave very little space for meaningful dialogue. And so that would be working on team meetings, I think, and asking great questions. I think that could be the really good start, at least reflecting on how we do things and how we ask questions, how we communicate online through Slack or through Microsoft Teams or whatever, I think is really, really great conversation to have.
So you are on the east coast of Canada. In a perfect world, you'd get in your car and you'd drive in the town you're in to present in the meeting in 3D. But with planes and Zoom, what tends to be your geography and how do we get a hold of you?
Most of my work is across Canada, so I'm pretty mobile. I have a dog but no kids, so that helps. I tend to travel a lot across the country. Here and there, I will travel internationally. I love traveling anyway, so it's not a pain for me. People can reach out to me on my personal website, personal professional, jasondoiron.ca. My social media of choice is LinkedIn, is where I share most of my blogs, my content, my videos. And so that's the best way. But other than that, I think I have a bookable calendar that's always open to people if they want to have a half-hour coffee chat, whether it's in person or on Zoom. Whatever is available in my schedule, I can offer for a quick chat. I tend to be a very generous person. So if anyone wants to brainstorm some ideas, I'm totally willing to help out where I can.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Jason, my co-host Wayne, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. This is a really good conversation. If you're a business that's getting stuck in a communication and the culture might be going, reach out to Jason. If you want to find out how to talk about failures and make it a shared experience so people learn from it, Jason also has the Fuck Up Nights on the East Coast. This is all about growth. Nothing's 100% perfect, because if you say it's 100% perfect, someone's lying to you.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8, and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from @Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer: please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.